When my parents passed away in a tragic car accident, my world shattered. I was only 24, barely out of university, with no siblings or extended family to lean on. Grief consumed me, and it felt like the ground had been yanked from under my feet. My parents had always been my pillars of strength, and their sudden absence left me adrift in a storm I wasn't prepared for. Amid the darkness, I clung to the one bright spot in my life, my husband, Ravi. We had only been married for a year, and his warmth had been a source of comfort during my parents' illness. When they passed, he promised to stand by me, to be my family when I felt I had none. I believed him. But promises, I would soon learn, were just empty words. Shortly after my parents' funeral, cracks began to show in our marriage. At first, they were subtle. Ravi working late, coming home distant and irritable. He assured me it was just stress from work, but my gut told me something was wrong. Then, his family began visiting our home more frequently, bringing with them a wave of judgment and criticism. "You're too slow with housework," his mother said one afternoon as she inspected the kitchen like a drill sergeant. "And look at these dishes, still wet. You were spoiled in your parents' house, weren't you?" Ravi said nothing. He sat silently in the living room as his mother's sharp words cut into me. I tried to dismiss it as cultural differences at first. After all, Ravi's family had traditional values, and I assumed they were just adjusting to having a modern daughter-in-law. But as the weeks turned into months, their visits turned into stays, and their criticisms turned into demands. Then came the bombshell. One evening, Ravi came home late as usual, his face clouded with an expression I couldn't quite read. "We need to talk," he said, avoiding my gaze. My heart sank. "What is it?" He hesitated for a moment before blurting out, "I think we should take a break. I need some space to figure things out." It felt like a knife to the chest. "A break?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We're married, Ravi. What does that even mean?" He didn't answer. Instead, he packed a bag and left that night, leaving me alone in the house. The next morning, his family arrived with their suitcases. "We're moving in," his mother announced as if she owned the place. "Ravi told us everything. We'll help you adjust while he sorts himself out." Adjust? What was I adjusting to? My husband abandoning me? But I didn't argue. I was too emotionally drained, too lost in my grief and confusion to fight back. It didn't take long for their true intentions to surface. Ravi's mother and father treated me like their personal maid. I cooked, cleaned, and catered to their every whim while they criticized everything I did. "You call this tea?" his father scoffed one morning, shoving the cup away. "Even a child could do better." At first, I tried to appease them, thinking they might soften if I showed kindness, but their demands only grew. Soon, I was waking up at dawn to prepare their breakfast, spending the day cleaning, and staying up late to iron their clothes. I felt like a shadow of my former self, a servant in my own home, with no one to turn to. My friends drifted away as I withdrew into isolation, too ashamed to tell them what was happening. And Ravi? He stopped answering my calls altogether. One day, while I was scrubbing the kitchen floor, Ravi's mother loomed over me with a smirk. "You should be grateful we're here," she said. "Without us, you'd have nothing." Her words echoed in my mind long after she walked away. Nothing, was that what my life had become? Still, I held on to a sliver of hope that Ravi would return and things would go back to the way they were. But deep down, I knew the truth. The man I had married was gone, and the family I had married into saw me as nothing more than a burden. The days blurred into weeks, and the weight of their cruelty began to suffocate me. But as I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, I made a silent promise to myself. I wouldn't let them break me. Little did I know, the turning point in my life was just around the corner. As the weeks stretched into months, I fell into a routine that left me both physically and emotionally drained. My days revolved around fulfilling endless demands, each one more demeaning than the last. It wasn't just the housework. My in-laws seemed to find pleasure in reminding me of my place in the family. "You're lucky Ravi married you," his mother would sneer as I set the table for dinner. "What do you even bring to this family? You're useless without him." I wanted to fight back, to shout that I wasn't useless, but I was too worn down. They had taken everything from me, my confidence, my home, my sense of self. One evening, as I was folding laundry in the corner of the living room, my father-in-law walked in, speaking on the phone. His voice was unusually enthusiastic. "Of course, we'd be honored to have you for dinner, sir," he said, bowing his head slightly as if the person on the other end could see him. "It's the least we can do to show our gratitude for everything you've done for the company." When he hung up, he turned to me with a sharp glare. Dinner needs to be perfect tomorrow night. My boss is coming over, and if you embarrass me, you'll regret it." I nodded silently, suppressing the urge to snap back. The next day was a whirlwind of preparations. I was up before dawn, scrubbing every corner of the house, shopping for the finest ingredients, and cooking a feast fit for royalty. My hands ached, my back screamed in protest. But I didn't stop, not because I cared about impressing my father-in-law's boss, but because I needed to prove to myself that I was capable of more than they believed. By the time the doorbell rang that evening, I was exhausted but proud of the spread I had prepared. My in-laws had dressed up as though they were hosting a state dinner, and I was instructed to stay in the kitchen, out of sight. "Just bring the food out when we call for it," my mother-in-law hissed, shooing me away. I stood in the kitchen, my heart pounding as I heard the door open. My father-in-law's booming voice filled the air as he greeted his boss, a man he clearly revered. "Welcome, sir, please, come in, it's an honor to have you here." Curiosity got the better of me, and I peeked through the doorway. The man standing in the foyer was tall, with a commanding presence that made the room seem smaller. His suit was impeccable, and his expression was one of quiet confidence, but as his eyes scanned the room, they landed on me, and froze. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it, but then he spoke, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Sana, is that you?" My breath caught in my throat. How did he know my name? Before I could respond, my father-in-law stepped in, laughing nervously. "Oh, don't mind her, sir, she's just the help." The man's eyes narrowed, and he turned to face my father-in-law with an intensity that made the room fall silent. "The help?" he repeated, his tone icy. "Do you have any idea who she is?" I felt the blood drain from my face. Who I was? What was he talking about? My father-in-law stammered, clearly caught off guard. I don't understand, sir. She's my daughter-in-law." "But," the man cut him off, his gaze never leaving mine. "Sana, it's me, don't you recognize me?" I stared at him, my mind racing. There was something familiar about him, but I couldn't place it. Then, like a floodgate opening, the memories came rushing back. "Mr. Sharma," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He smiled, a warmth in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. "Yes, your father and I worked together for years. He was my closest friend." The room seemed to spin as the weight of his words sank in. This man, this powerful, imposing figure, was my late father's best friend, and now, he was my father-in-law's boss. The silence in the room was suffocating. My in-laws exchanged nervous glances, clearly caught off guard by the revelation. I, too, was struggling to process what Mr. Sharma had just said. My father's best friend? Why had my father never mentioned him? And if he was so close to my family, why had he disappeared from our lives? Before I could ask, Mr. Sharma turned to my father-in-law, his expression cold and unforgiving. "You've been treating her like a servant?" he asked, his voice low but seething with anger. My father-in-law stammered, "And no, sir, it's not like that. She helps out." "Helps out?" Mr. Sharma cut him off, his voice rising. "I saw how she was hidden away in the kitchen. Don't try to lie to me." He turned back to me, his gaze softening. "Sana, you don't belong here. Come with me." The words hit me like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. For the first time in years, someone was standing up for me, seeing my worth, but before I could answer, my mother-in-law stepped in. "She's our daughter-in-law," she snapped, her voice trembling with both anger and fear. "She belongs here with her husband." Mr. Sharma raised an eyebrow. "And where is her husband? Why isn't he here, supporting her?" The question cut through the room like a knife. Ravi wasn't here, he was never here. My in-laws had no answer, and their silence was damning. Finally, I found my voice. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Sharma," I said, trying to steady my shaking hands, "but I can't just leave." He frowned, clearly not satisfied with my answer. "You don't have to live like this, Sana. Your father would never have wanted this for you." His words brought tears to my eyes. My father, the man who had always believed in me, who had given me the strength to dream big. What would he think if he saw me now? But the chains of obligation were too strong. I couldn't just walk away, not yet. "Thank you," I whispered, "but I need time." Mr. Sharma didn't argue further, but the fire in his eyes told me he wasn't going to let this go. He stayed for dinner, though the atmosphere was tense. My in-laws fawned over him, desperately trying to win back his favor, but he remained distant, his attention mostly focused on me. As he was leaving, he handed me a business card. "If you ever need anything at all, call me," he said firmly. I nodded, tucking the card into my pocket. The next few days were unbearable. My in-laws were furious with me, blaming me for embarrassing them in front of Mr. Sharma. They doubled down on their mistreatment, giving me even more chores and berating me at every opportunity. But something had changed in me. Mr. Sharma's words lingered in my mind, igniting a spark of hope I hadn't felt in years. I began to dream of a life beyond this house, beyond this toxic environment. One evening, while cleaning my husband's study, I found a pile of unpaid bills hidden in his desk drawer. My heart sank as I realized the depth of our financial troubles. No wonder my in-laws clung to Mr. Sharma's goodwill, they were drowning in debt. That night, as I lay awake, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this be my life. I didn't know how, but I was going to find a way out. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, but the tension in the house was palpable. The night before, I had overheard my father-in-law on the phone with Mr. Sharma. He was desperate, pleading for some sort of favor. "He's our last hope," I heard him mutter to my mother-in-law afterward. "If he pulls out his investments, we'll lose everything." They were right to worry. Ravi had racked up enormous debts, much of it from failed business ventures he'd kept hidden. And now, Mr. Sharma, perhaps the only person who could save them, was squarely on my side. That realization gave me strength. I wasn't just some helpless woman trapped in their web of control. I had a voice, and for the first time in years, I was ready to use it. The next day, Mr. Sharma called me directly. "I've thought about what you said, Sana," he began. "I won't pressure you to leave your in-laws, but I want you to come work for me. You're brilliant and capable, don't let them convince you otherwise." His words filled me with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years, but the idea of working outside the house terrified me. My in-laws had always discouraged me, telling me I wasn't smart enough or educated enough. "I don't know," I murmured. "You don't have to decide now," he said gently, "but remember, this is your life. You deserve to live it on your own terms." That evening, I finally confronted my in-laws. I walked into the living room, clutching the business card Mr. Sharma had given me. My hands were shaking, but my voice was firm. "I've decided to take Mr. Sharma's offer," I announced. My mother-in-law's face turned red with fury. "You will do no such thing," she spat. "What will people say if our daughter-in-law goes to work like some common woman?" I met her gaze, unflinching. What people think doesn't matter to me anymore. My father-in-law tried a different tactic, his tone manipulative. "Sana, think about the family. If you leave, how will we manage? We're on the verge of losing everything. Maybe you should have thought about that before treating me like a servant," I shot back, my voice rising. Their protests continued, but I didn't back down. For the first time in years, I felt a surge of confidence. I wasn't going to let their fear and control dictate my life any longer. The next morning, I packed my things. My in-laws hurled insults as I walked out the door, but I didn't care. For the first time since my parents' death, I felt free. Mr. Sharma met me outside his office building. He had arranged everything, a place for me to stay, a job that suited my skills, and even a plan to help me reclaim the confidence I had lost. "You're going to do great things, Sana," he said, smiling warmly. In the weeks that followed, my life transformed. I threw myself into my work, discovering talents I never knew I had. Mr. Sharma became not just a mentor, but a father figure, reminding me of the love and support my own father had once given me. As for my in-laws, their world began to crumble. Without my unpaid labor, their household fell into chaos, and when Ravi returned, expecting to pick up where he left off, he found a very different woman waiting for him. "You're too late," I told him, my voice steady. "I'm not the same person you left behind." His pleas fell on deaf ears. For once, I wasn't looking back. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, gazing at the city lights. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the future. Mr. Sharma's voice echoed in my mind. "This is your life. You deserve to live it on your own terms." And that's exactly what I intended to do.